Hello everyone, my name is Suzanne and I call myself a gardening and cut flower enthusiast, and I have my cottage garden and my cutting patch for growing cut flowers in Devon in the UK. In this week's video we're going to be talking a little bit about how many plants you need to fit into the area that you have to grow in. Predominantly I'm going to be talking about cut flower spacing and not the spacing that I do in my garden. I'm in the greenhouse now and it's actually feeling warm in here, almost warm enough to start thinking about sowing some seeds. So if we're going to be sowing seeds, which I expect a lot of you have already started doing, how do you know how many seeds to plant? Some of you will be growing in beds like a flower farmer. Some of you will have a cutting patch like me, so slightly smaller beds. Some of you may be growing in grow bags or containers. But whatever space you have to grow in, the plants you plant still need to be spaced accordingly. And quite often the spaces that will be on your seed packet are for spacing if you were putting in the garden. And usually for cut flowers, you can position your plants much closer together. Wouldn't it be easy if you could just space all plants at the same intervals? But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. And different growers also space their plants at different intervals. And that's usually because of the environment where they are growing. People who have a much windier site will quite often have to put things much closer together to almost help them prop things up, and they can get away with that because they've got really good airflow and ventilation. But if you're in a really sheltered site, you would probably find that the plants wouldn't like being that close together because they need a bit more ventilation, a bit more circulation. So how do you know which plants to space at which distance? Okay, so let's talk about the things that need lots of room. Let's say we're going to go for an example as 30 centimetres. Why do some plants need 30 centimetre spacing? Several reasons. One is to do with ventilation. Let's take, for example, a calendula. A calendula you would think could go closer together than 30 centimetres, but they do tend to be prone to powdery mildew. So I've always planted at 30 centimetres because if I've planted them closer together, they have had and suffered with powdery mildew. Another reason plants might need to be further apart is if they're really branching varieties and they basically just need the room to be able to put all their branching side shoots out. Another reason for 30 centimetre planting could be the size of their roots. You want to make sure that they're being able to take up all the nutrition and moisture that they need to from the soil. So what plants would I plant at 30 centimetre intervals? Well, one of my favourites is cosmos. It's very branching, so it does like a lot of room. Bells of Ireland, they are also very, very branching. Lots of people may see them and think they're a bit like a stock, and they have one central flower, but they actually really branch, and they branch low at the base. So they really need that room to be able to put those side branches out. Cleome, that's another branching variety that likes a lot of space. Borage. Borage is a really leafy, bushy plant. I'm not going to grow borage in the cut flower garden this year, but I will be putting some in my cottage garden. Statice. Statice, again, branches quite low. The branches are a bit more, I suppose, like Verbena boreensis. They're not really leafy, but they do come out quite low from the base. Auroch is one that I've always grown at 30 centimetres, but I'm very tempted to try that a little bit closer together this year. So what about things you can plant closer together? Let's say, for example, 15 centimetres, which is half the space again. So things that can grow at 15 centimetres are quite often things that you want to encourage really long straight stems on. and the competition from the plants next to them makes them much, much taller. It's also things that are not so worried about the root competition. They may have smaller root ball, and they may also not be quite as leafy to worry about mildews and different mould and things getting in amongst the leaves. So they're quite often plants with much airier foliage. For 15 centimetre spacing that I would plant, it would be things like larkspur, Greek cress, sweet peas, ranunculus and anemones, candy tuft, nigella, foxgloves, stocks, and then what about those plants somewhere in the middle, 20-25 centimetres? Well, that's my favourite spacing, and I only wish I could get some of the 30 centimetres to share this group, because it would make finding out how many plants you need a lot easier. So in the 20 centimetre plant spacing, I have things like cerinthe, scabious, dill, dorcas, zinnias, dianthus and ami, and just requiring a little bit more room than that, not quite 30 centimetres. So I plant these at 25 centimetres, Chinese aster, phlox and beplorum. Okay, so we know the spacing of the plants that we want to grow. We've gone outside and we've measured the areas. We've measured our grow bag, and our grow bag is 50 centimetres by 70 centimetres. We've measured our bed, which measures 1 metre by 4.5 metres, and we've measured our pots, which are 33 centimetres by 33 centimetres. So if we take one plant as an example, how many can we fit into that space? Well, let's start with one of the plants that needs a lot of space. Let's start with the cosmos. How many cosmos seeds do I sow for each of these different areas? Well, let's start with the 33 by 33 centimetre pot. Not very many, I'm afraid. One cosmos plant will fit in the middle of that pot. And what about your grow bag? Well, in your grow bag, you could fit 4 cosmos plants. 4 is quite a nice number if you're doing bouquets and arrangements for yourself. But what if you are thinking of selling more flowers? If you had a 1 metre by 4.5 metre bed, you would be able to plant 45 cosmos. Okay, so that's a 30 centimetre plant. So you can get 45 of them, 4 of them, or 1 of them in your different space allocations. But what if I was growing something that needed 20 centimetres spacing in between? How many could I fit in my area? So if I was spacing my plants at 20 centimetres, and let's take an example of, say, a zinnia. So I'm spacing my zinnias at 20 centimetre intervals. How many zinnias can I fit in my 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre pot? Well, I'm afraid it is just one again, just one zinnia in my pot. But in my grow bag, I can actually fit 6 zinnias in my grow bag. And in my 4.5 metre by 1 metre bed, I can fit amazing 110 plants, 110 zinnias. I'm not sure I'm going to need 110 zinnias, but you might. Okay, and what about 15 centimetre interval plants? And let's say, in this example, a stock. Okay, so we're sowing our stock seeds to go into our pot, our 30 centimetre by 30 centimetre pot. Okay, so if you're spacing your stocks at 15 centimetres, you can actually put 4 stock plants in your pot. In your grow bag, you can actually fit 12 stock plants into your grow bag. So if you were planting your stock at 15 centimetre intervals in your 1 metre by 4.5 metre bed, you would be able to fit in a staggering 179 stocks. Now, working this out is actually fairly easy. What you need is a good old graph paper pad, and then you work out your key, so how many centimetres each square is going to be. And I always find that it's easier to say that each square is 10 centimetres. So this is a little diagram I did of the grow bags, and you can see I've listed what the plants were that fit in those spaces. I've drawn the grow bag, which is 50 centimetres by 70 centimetres, so 5 squares by 7 squares if we're saying each square is 10 centimetres. And then I've put my little X's at either 30 centimetres, 25 centimetres, 20 centimetres or 15 centimetres. And you just change the size of your space depending on what space you have. So this is actually a diagram of my low tunnel. My low tunnel is 3.8 metres by 1 metre. And here you can see I've plotted 15 centimetre spacing, which will be how I will space my ranunculus, my anemones and my stock. And you can see, because my low tunnel is only 3.8 metres, I can only fit 144 plants in my low tunnels. This diagram is more for my benefit than yours, but it's just to show you that you can draw any size space that you have. So these are my beds that are 4.5 metres, and that you can easily mark out the spacing intervals for different types of plant. So it doesn't matter what size area you're working with, you can easily draw it on some graph paper and then work out how many plants will fit in the space. So when you've done that, you then will have an idea of how many seeds you need to germinate and successfully grow. This is an idea of my sowing list that I've got here. So I only need 9 calendula, and I've ticked that, which means I must already have 9, so that's brilliant. I need 12 beplurum, I've also given that a tick. 12 phlox, that's had a tick. 12 ami, that's also had a tick. 25 larkspur, that's had a tick. 25 snapdragons, that's had a tick. And 12 Dorcas, got a tick, but there are a lot of things with no tick at all. So I still need to sow my half-hardy annuals, things like my Cosmos, my Status, my Bells of Ireland, my Auroch, my Cleome. If I decide to sow all of this, I haven't even made my final decisions yet. Asters, dill. Oh, I've got ticks next to my Phacelia and cornflowers as well. Rudbeckia I sowed in my last video, and I'm pleased to say we've got some really good germination there. I'll try and pop a picture up. And also the breezer grass that I sowed in the last video, that's also come up. So that's good news. So if you're growing on a small scale, it's worth realising that just because you've got a bed that's 4.5 metres by 1 metre, you don't need to fill that bed with the same variety. You can break it down into sections, which is what I do and which I will do again this year. So I break my beds down into either 6 sections or 5 sections, depending on what the bed is spaced at. So if I'm spacing my plants at 25 centimetres, I will break that bed down into 6 different varieties of plant, because in each of those sections, those 6 sections, if I'm spacing the plants at 25 centimetres, I can plant 12 plants of each variety. And for me, 12 is a nice number. I don't need lots and lots. I don't sell wholesale flowers or anything like that. So 12 of each variety is lovely. And it means I can have 6 different varieties. And I love growing a variety of different things. If I were growing my plants at 15 centimetre intervals, I break my beds into 5 sections, which you might think is a bit strange, because surely if I'm growing them at 15 centimetres, I can grow more of them. And the reason I do that is because things like stocks, once you've cut them, they're gone. So I'd rather have more of them in a space. And with things like my anemones that are 15 centimetres, I want more of those because I don't have a lot of other things flowering when they flower. So that's why I tend to just have 5 varieties of 15 centimetre spacing, and then I can have 20 plants of each in each section. So you could have in a section 20 stock, 20 anemones, 20 ranunculus. I actually will be doing a lot more stocks and ranunculus. Hopefully they're behind me, and some of them look a bit sorry for themselves. These ones are really leggy. These are Anemone the Bride, and the reason these are really leggy is because they've been in my airing cupboard and there's no light in there, and I hadn't realised that they'd sprouted. These ones look a bit better because they weren't in my airing cupboard, so they look much lusher and greener and happier. Who's this actually? These are Picote Pink. And these are the ones, actually, 30th of January that I did in the sprouting ranunculus video. And these I'd mistakenly tried to sprout them in the greenhouse. It's far too cold in here. So these have actually been put in different compost and tried again. And you can see, I think I put 25 in the video. Really rookie mistake putting them in the greenhouse because, there's one just there. There is another one there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So about 50% success rate on me stupidly thinking just because I started them in my greenhouse at that time last year that it meant I could start them in my greenhouse this year, which I couldn't. What I think I'm going to do is get a thermometer for in here, because at the moment I just go with my gut feeling, and perhaps my gut feeling is not quite good enough. But anyway, they're coming on slowly but surely. But I'm thinking they're probably going to be okay out here now, and they certainly need light. An airing cupboard is not a great place to put them, but I'm glad I put them in there because I think if I hadn't, they all would have just rotted off. I've always found anemones far more difficult than ranunculus, but I've got some good anemones in the house. Yeah, they were anemones, weren't they? So yes, I've done a bit better with anemones this year, but I have got, and just in the spirit of showing failures, in here are, I will plant them probably in one of those grow bags, apart from like this one. I mean, this was, I can never find the camera. There you are. This was an anemone. So I don't think that one's going to grow. A few of them are not too bad. Like he's still quite firm. But I lost a few. And there's a few ranunculus here that might do something. We'll see. But, I mean, this one's quite a nice firm one. So I will try and replant the ones that haven't sprouted. But definitely there are a few rotten ones in here. So definitely need to get that cracked. Getting the moisture right is the important thing. If they're too dry, they won't sprout, and if they're too wet, they rot. I've always been, I think I've had beginner's luck in the past, and I've always found it, well, the ranunculus in particular, I've always found quite easy, but they've tested me a bit this year. But luckily, I'm growing plenty of them, so I had room for error, which is another thing you might like to consider when you're working out how many seeds to plant. Perhaps with the easy things to grow like cosmos, you can just plant what you need because they're pretty foolproof. But then when it comes to the more tricky things, it might be a good idea to just plant a few extra for a percentage that may not germinate at all, or may get eaten by a rabbit or get eaten by something else. Okay, well, I think we'll bring that video to an end here. I hope that all made sense. I hope it was helpful, and I hope it was interesting. I wish you all the best of luck with your seed sowing. I really need to start putting a bit more effort into that. I need to clear some space in here and get some trays on the go. And I'm really looking forward to sharing with you what I've got that I'm sowing and how it's growing on. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.